Carl Jung taught that the single most important journey a person can take is the one toward becoming who they truly are. This foundational Jungian idea isn't just psychology, it's the quiet, steady art of self-reclamation. But Jung's work also contains a profound warning about this path. According to Jung, the journey inward is rarely straightforward, as it forces us to confront our own reflections. This core tenet of the Jungian model is about radical self-honesty. A true Jungian analysis requires us to look at the parts of ourselves we have learned to ignore. But what happens when someone else hijacks that sacred process? What happens when they take your reflection and deliberately bend it? You became their bent mirror. It didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, subtle warping, a change so gradual you barely noticed until you no longer recognized yourself. Perhaps you remember a specific moment, a dinner with friends. He's telling a story, a deep insight you shared with him in confidence just last week, a moment of vulnerability that was yours alone. But now the story belongs to him. He tells it with practiced ease, and the table hangs on his every word. They look at him with admiration for his depth, his wisdom. And you sit there, silent. A ghost at the feast. You feel a strange sense of vertigo, the unnerving feeling of watching your own life be lived by someone else and lived better. You've been erased from your own narrative. In that moment, you are not his partner. You are not even an accessory. You are just the bent mirror he holds up to the world, one that reflects his own image back, only brighter, grander, and more interesting than the truth. And in the aftermath, when the room is empty and you are finally alone, the silence is a vacuum. It pulls at you, demanding an explanation. So you start digging through the wreckage of your own memory, searching for the black box. For the moment, it all went wrong. You become an expert archaeologist of your own perceived failures. You tell yourself if only you had been less something, less emotional, less needy, more independent. You rehearse conversations that are long dead, editing your own lines, trying to find a different outcome, a way you could have fixed it, a way you could have fixed them. This exhaustion, this persistent hollow ache of not being enough, it feels like truth. It feels like a verdict you have earned. Let me be clear. You've seen it. You've lived through it. You didn't imagine it. The constant low-grade confusion was not a flaw in the system. It was the system itself. The way your boundaries were called attacks. The way your needs were framed as drama. This was not a relationship that failed. It was a psychic environment designed to keep you small, and questioning your own reality was the only way to survive it. The architecture of that environment is built upon a powerful psychological principle, one that Carl Jung identified as a cornerstone of human interaction. He called it projection. Projection is the unconscious act of offloading your own disowned qualities onto another person. It is the ego's defensive reflex. When a person cannot face their own shadow, their insecurities, their shame, their emptiness, they don't simply hide it. They export it. They project it onto the nearest available screen. And you became the screen. You were chosen for your strength, for your light, for your capacity for empathy. They saw in you a stable container for the chaos they could not hold within themselves. Every criticism they leveled at you was an unacknowledged confession about themselves. Every flaw they found in you was a piece of their own shadow they refused to own. The relationship was not a simple failure between two people. It was a complex and often one-sided confrontation with the shadow. And you were living on the front lines, holding a mirror that was bent into the exact shape of their own denial. To be a bent mirror is to live in a state of quiet contradiction. It is to be praised for your strength in one moment, and then punished for it in the next. It is to be told you are everything to them, while feeling in your bones like you are nothing at all. This experience is not random. It is a pattern. And according to the Jungian framework, understanding patterns is the first step toward breaking them. Carl Jung himself said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." So let us bring the unconscious into the light. Let us look, without flinching, at the clear signs that you were made to serve as their mirror. Sign number 1. Their accusations are unspoken confessions. Think back to the words they used, the criticisms that seemed to come out of nowhere, that left you feeling confused and defensive. They called you selfish on the day you finally took 2 hours for yourself after a week of catering to their needs. They accused you of being angry when you were simply quiet, trying to process one of their sudden emotional shifts. They called you dishonest when you were hiding a small, harmless truth simply to avoid their disproportionate reaction. This is the primary function of the bent mirror. As Jung taught, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Their irritation was never truly about you. It was a diagnostic tool for their own shadow. They were looking into the mirror of you, seeing the reflection of their own selfishness, their own repressed anger, their own deceptions, and they blamed the mirror for the image. They had to, because to admit the reflection was accurate would be to admit fault. And for a personality held together by a fragile persona, admitting fault feels like annihilation. So they attacked the mirror instead. They attacked you. Sign number 2. Your strengths are reframed as flaws. Your capacity for empathy, the very quality that likely drew them in, was eventually weaponized against you. It was reframed as weakness, as being a doormat. Your natural independence wasn't celebrated. It was a threat. It was reframed as being cold, uncaring, or too distant. Your desire for peace and harmony wasn't seen as a gift. It was used to your disadvantage, reframed as you being conflict avoidant or passive, an excuse for them to steamroll your banabsundirs. This is a subtle but devastating form of psychological erosion. Jung spoke of the persona, the social mask we all wear. For a person with a deeply integrated shadow, their persona is authentic, a true expression of their best self. But for someone at war with their own inner world, their persona is a brittle fortress, and your genuine light threatened that fortress. For them to feel strong, your strength had to be called stubbornness. For them to feel perceptive, your intelligence had to be called manipulative. The mirror was not only bent to hide their flaws, it was deliberately warped to dull your own light, to diminish your reflection, so that theirs, by comparison, could appear bright. Sign number 3. You feel responsible for their emotions. You became a master meteorologist of their moods. You learned to read the subtle shift in the air the moment they walked into a room. You could predict the storm front from the way they closed a door, the impending freeze from the tone of a one-word text. Your own nervous system became a barometer, constantly measuring their internal weather. And your day, your mood, your very sense of peace became entirely dependent on that forecast. If they were happy, you could breathe. If they were agitated, You held your breath, scanning your own recent behavior for the supposed cause. What did I do? What did I say? How can I fix this? This is a state of being that Carl Jung called participation mystique, a term for a psychic fusion where the boundaries between two people become dangerously blurred. You are no longer a separate person with a separate emotional life. You are an extension of them. This is not intimacy, it is absorption. The mirror's final, most tragic distortion is when it ceases to have any reflection of its own. It no longer shows a warped version of you. It only shows them. Your own face has disappeared, replaced entirely by the task of managing theirs. Sign number 4. You begin to censor your own joy. Do you remember the feeling? You get good news, a promotion at work, a breakthrough in a creative project, a compliment from a stranger that makes your day. For a fleeting moment, you feel a surge of pure, uncomplicated happiness. And then, your second thought is, how do I tell them? You start rehearsing the announcement in your head, finding ways to downplay it, to make it smaller, less significant, because you know, instinctively, that your joy will not be met with theirs. It will be met with a subtle dismissal, a forced smile, a quick change of subject, or worse, a sudden crisis of their own that pulls all the attention back. According to Jungian thought, a person who is deeply disconnected from their own potential, their own gold hidden in the shadow, cannot tolerate the genuine light in others. It highlights their own inner poverty, and so you learn to dim your own light before you even brought it into the room. The bent mirror you held had become so warped, it could no longer reflect happiness without twisting it into a threat. You began to hide your best self from them, to protect it from their reflection. Sign number 5. Their compliments feel like cages. This is one of the most insidious distortions. They would say things like, "You are so strong, you can handle anything." Let's dissect that word. Strong. In their mouth, it wasn't a compliment about your resilience. It was a justification. It was the permission they gave themselves to be weak, to be unaccountable, to lean on you until your back was breaking. It meant, "You are strong, so I don't have to be." They would say, "You're so much smarter than I am about these things." And this was not a recognition of your intellect. It was a delegation. It was the transference of all emotional and logistical labor onto your shoulders. It meant, "You are smarter, so you can carry the mental load for both of us." These were not compliments. They were job descriptions for the role they needed you to play. Jung understood that the persona, or social mask, could be used not just for social grace, but for manipulation. Their words were the beautiful, gilded frame on the bent mirror. The frame distracted you from the fact that the glass itself was designed to hold you in one, very specific, distorted shape. Sign number 6. Your silence becomes their panic. For months, maybe years, you pleaded, you explained, you argued, you presented evidence. You tried to make them see. You gave them the very best of your words, your logic, and your heart, hoping to finally fix the reflection. And then, one day, you stopped. You didn't announce it. You just went quiet. You responded to a provocative text with a simple, "Okay." You let their dramatic sigh hang in the air without asking what was wrong. You stopped participating in the argument, and the reaction was not peace. It was panic. Their anger escalated. The accusations became more frantic. They needed a reaction. They needed the feedback loop. In the Jungian sense, You had begun the painful but necessary process of withdrawing your projections. When you are no longer projecting the role of savior or peacemaker onto yourself, you stop playing the part. When the mirror stops reflecting the drama and simply shows a still, quiet surface, they are forced to see themselves for a terrifying second, and the void is unbearable. Your silence becomes their crisis. And in that quiet space your silence creates, you begin to hear the old tapes, the echoes of their voice in your mind. You're just so insecure. But this time, something is different. You don't absorb it. You don't defend against it. You simply flip the mirror, and a new voice, your own, calmly speaks the truth in the quiet of your mind. My insecurity was a reflection of your terror of being seen. You're too emotional. The mirror flips again. My emotion was a reflection of your refusal to feel anything at all. You always have to be right. My need to be right was a reflection of your constant, dizzying gaslighting. This is the moment. The shift is not loud. It is a profound internal recalibration. It's the realization that you were never in a negotiation. You were in a psychic war you didn't even know you were fighting. You realized the goal was never to fix the mirror. It was never to convince them of its distortions. It was never about winning the argument. The only goal was to realize that the mirror that was never yours to hold. For so long, you believed you had to become stronger, louder, more resilient, more something to survive them. But the final transformation is a quiet one. It is not an act of aggression. It is an act of integration. It is the slow, steady process of calling all the pieces of yourself home. The joy you censored, the strength they misused, the silence they feared. You have become a threat, not because you're aggressive, but because you're whole. Wholeness does not feel like a victory parade. It does not feel like the triumphant end of a movie. It feels like stillness. It's the quiet morning you wake up and realize you haven't thought about them for a full 24 hours. It's the moment you hear a song they used to love, and you feel a flicker of memory, but not the familiar gut-wrenching pain. It is the slow, steady return of your own gravity. For so long you were holding up a bent mirror. A mirror designed by the mechanism of projection to reflect back everything they could not bear to see in themselves. And you contorted yourself trying to fix the image, believing the distortion was your own. The most difficult and most liberating truth is this. The journey of healing is not about trying to straighten the bent mirror. It is about realizing it was never your mirror to begin with, and you have the right to simply put it down. This is a bittersweet freedom. It carries the ghost of what you thought you had, the phantom limb of a future that was never real. The scars from holding that mirror, from its sharp, warped edges digging into your hands, are real. Carl Jung taught that we cannot simply cut out the darkness. We must integrate it. We must understand it. The memories do not disappear, but your relationship to them. The pain becomes data. The trauma becomes a teacher. The relationship, in its own brutal and unintentional way, gave you a gift. It was the terrible gift of awareness. It forced you to the door of that unlit room inside yourself, the one containing your own shadow. And in the end, the confrontation that mattered was not with them. It was with yourself. Carl Jung taught that we cannot simply cut out the darkness. We must integrate it. We must understand it. The memories do not disappear, but your relationship to them changes. The pain becomes data. The trauma becomes a teacher. The relationship, in its own brutal and unintentional way, gave you a gift. It was the terrible gift of awareness. It forced you to the door of that unlit room inside yourself, the one containing your own shadow. And in the end, the confrontation that mattered was not with them. It was with yourself, a single word that describes your own reflection. Now that you are taking it back, not for anyone else, for you. This path is often a solitary one. If you are looking for a companion in that solitude, our guided journal, The Untangled Self, was designed for this quiet work. It does not offer answers. It offers the right questions to help you find your own. The link is in the description. A small, simple hand mirror, lying on a windowsill. It reflects only the open sky.